For it is by grace you are saved through faith, not of yourselves, but it is a gift of God. Ephesians 2:8. Welcome to Grace Bond Ministries. All right, everybody. Welcome to Grace Bond Ministries. We got Jonathan Jenkins and Christian Walton here. We have no special guest today, except for probably Jesus and Satan.
They're always special guests.
Yeah, they're always special guests. Well, Satan's the reason we're having this discussion today, and Jesus is the reason we can have this discussion. So,
there we go.
Man, we're getting into a controversial, hot topic today. It's it's one of those things. Everybody wants to talk about it, but at the same time, I think nobody wants to talk about it. Because everybody wants to talk about it until you have to argue, and debate. And it's especially harder for leaders and pastors and people who actually have to make these decisions and that affects other people and lead other people. It's always harder to deal with this, to deal with a lot of big decisions because we just have so many more people that are listening to us and following us. So what we're talking about today is the Disney controversy. So we're not I wouldn't say we're experts. I wouldn't say that we know everything that's going on behind the scenes. I mean, I don't work for not Chick-fil-A. I don't work for Disney corporate. DeSantis doesn't call me to ask me about his decisions. I hear about it just like everybody else, but I do think that Christian and I both have been gifted by God with this ability to kind of understand what's going on, and to talk and to debate. We've had a lot of debating and whatnot throughout our years, and I think we're just trained to kind of calm everybody down. We want to calm everybody down. We wanted to discuss this, but we are going to give forth our view. And if you have me on Facebook, I don't do it as much anymore just because I don't have time, and just because Facebook arguments, they kind of just go south because you can't catch the tones and stuff. But when I debate on there, I'm debating for the people reading, but I've had people cuss me out, yell at me, and I know they're yelling because they use all caps. I know it's a hot topic, and I know that some people I know some people just don't want to talk about hot topics, but I say this all the time. That's the whole reason Grace Bomb Ministries is here. We want to have a place where people can come and give your thoughts, and let's discuss this. And and if we get a bunch of comments or some big comments or something, we'll go back. We'll have another video. We'll respond to those comments. We'll kind of address them a little better. But that's the whole purpose of this podcast, is to bring people who disagree or agree or whatever, just bring everybody together to have conversations about difficult topics. All right. So we're going to kind of get started here and introduce the topic. And Christian, if you want to go ahead and introduce it, and then we're kind of introduce the topic, and then towards the end, after we kind of get the whole gist of what's going on and what's actually happened between DeSantis and all liberals in the entire nation. Yeah. We're gonna just kind of cover all that stuff, what's going on, what really happened, and I think some of the stuff being portrayed is not what actually happened. So we want to put all that stuff forward, and we want to talk about what actually happened, and then towards the end, we're going to give our view and understanding of how should Christian people respond to this whole controversy, the whole controversy. All right. So not just should we cancel Disney, but also should we support this bill, that DeSantis put forward. All right. So Christian, why don't you go ahead and introduce us to the topic?
Yeah. So a lot of this has stemmed from this idea of the topic had come up right after they passed, or we're going to pass this Never Say Gay bill, which I've heard that if you actually look at the bill, this isn't really forced as much as the liberal media or media period has brought it forward. But this bill was brought forward saying that the education system would not be allowed to teach anything sexual identity orientation wise until after the third grade, from kindergarten through the third grade. They were not allowed to teach it And that's what DeSantis, the governor of Florida, was pushing for. And that's what was being passed. And through this process, Disney seemed to be silent. The CEO would come out later and say he wanted to kind of work behind the scenes and not really say anything. But being pushed by some of his cast members, there's around 77,000 employees at Disney World, is what the number I had found out. I don't really see. We've heard that there was a small amount of LGBTQIA plus cast members, but I couldn't really ever find a number about how many actually retaliated, how many were in protest, how many threatened to walk out if the CEO didn't say anything.
I heard somewhere, and granted it was from Ben Shapiro, and but I mean, from what I understood, there was about I mean, maybe 100 or something like that. I mean, it was a very small minority, which, I mean, they're a minority anyways. I mean, last statistic I saw, LGBTQIA plus only made up, I think it's a little less than 6% of our entire nation, 5.6%. I wish that number jumped, and maybe we'll get to that here in a second. But you know, that only makes up 5.6% of our entire nation. So it's obviously, even in Disney, I mean, there was a small minority. But another interesting thing is that Disney, I didn't know this, but Disney throughout the years has actually supported both parties. You know, Disney is a major, extremely major financial player. I mean, I could even imagine seeing how much they make and stuff as a company. But you know, they're a major financial player, and so they would support kind of both parties. You know, they wouldn't. I don't think they ever really wanted to take a stand. And even Ben Shapiro was like, "Hey, maybe we should." You know, maybe you should stick with that, you know, where, hey, listen, we want the people to decide and all this stuff. We don't want to be so major in our influence that people either, you know, choose Disney or choose a conservative, you know.
Yeah. And maybe it was some major writer, maybe some major publisher or something that was a part of the cast that was threatening to leave. And so he felt forced to.
Actually, what happened? This actually leaked. There was a board meeting. Some of the board were having a meeting, and they leaked some of the footage. And and Dr. Brown had posted something. I can't remember what exactly he posted, but it was an excerpt from that meeting. But you know, where they were talking about, you know, we need to respond to this, and people were basically getting angry and we're going to protest and all that, and we're basically angry at the CEO for not doing anything in response to this bill. You know, so and I would imagine in his spot, it's either, hey, you know, because even a small mob of LGBTQ people, I mean, even the small mob is huge, you know, because not only that, they also have the allies of people who also want what they'll call equal rights instead. So it was some kind of board meeting, and somebody brought it up and said, hey, we need to do something. We're angry. You know, we want to do something. And I heard even some of the lower employees were even getting into it just because they wanted to speak to the CEO about it. So, I mean, it's, like I said, this is such a small minority to cause such a huge fuss.
Yeah, it's a major topic. And I figured in order to truly look at it, we've got to go back to what exactly that acronym stands for, so that we're not looked at as fully ignorant. We've done our research. We went back. And if we look at the full acronym, it's LGBTQIA plus, and it stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer. And then the I is for intersex, the A is for asexuals. And then the plus stands for other identities like pansexual, or I've seen the two-spirit. And so this acronym has been added onto over the years. It started in the 90s with just LGBT. And then over the years, they've added more letters as more people have said they have different gender identities or sexualities. And so going into, I guess, the different points, lesbian, women or women aligned who are attracted to other women of the same sex. Gay is the opposite, men aligned who are attracted to men. And then bisexual denotes an attraction to all genders or both genders, male or female. Transgender, someone whose gender identity is different from sex associated with them at birth. And so they've wanted to change. They identify as something else. And then we were just discussing this before, but queer is an umbrella term for people who are not heterosexual and are not cisgender. Cisgender means you have the same sex that you associate at birth and also with your gender. And so intersex is people who are born with variations of sex characteristics that do not fit with binary definition of male or female bodies. Maybe somebody born with both parts or one part more than the other. And this does happen, but it is a rarity that you don't see too many options or too often. And so you have the A for allies or asexuals. And so that kind of rounds up this whole group that we're talking about. This is kind of what pushed the CEO of Disney to say something, what pushed this bill, because they're wanting to teach the kindergartners through the third graders. So anywhere from around 4 to 8 years old, 8, 9 years old. These are the ages that they're wanting to teach the kids. And this bill is fighting against that. And it's referred to as the HB 1557, all those legal terms that probably nobody knew about. I don't know about till I looked it up. But it officially says bans the instruction of gender identity and sexual orientation for public school children from kindergarten till the 3rd grade. And so this is what they're going out about it. And my first thought looking at this, I was like, well, thinking back to when I was in school trying to look it up, I'm like, did they even teach sexual education, period? Because if you boil it down to it, this would be part of almost the sexual education realm. And if I remember right, it was like 5th grade before we had anything related to sex education proposed to us. And so this bill, I'm like, it would just be the same as sexual education. So it would just make sense. But people are starting to retaliate. Do you have anything on that, Jonathan?
Yeah, and honestly, here's how and maybe our perception is entirely wrong, and I think this is how DeSantis would perceive it too. I'd hate to jump into this right now, but I think it'll help get a point, get across why this bill is even a thing, because our perception is that there's what people are trying to do is, at first it was, hey, we need to legalize LGBTQ relationships and marriage and stuff. Really, the marriage part. We need to legalize that. And now, what we see, I think you would probably agree with me on this, but what we see now is they want to normalize it, and the way you do that is you start young, and you teach or you give examples, or now that there's more and more people in that community, there's you see people who choose that lifestyle more often, and so what they want to do now, I think, is they want to normalize it. So, it's not just enough that it's legal, but they want to normalize it to say, hey, this is a normal choice. This is something that is natural choice that you can choose to do. Like it's okay. And so if you were going to do that, you would want to start young. I mean, especially with how the brain is developed and things like that. But and honestly, and people will disagree with us about that, because we don't think that people are born any of these ways. We think these are all choices. And so there's a big debate on, should we let people make these choices or not, or whatever. But when it starts influencing other people, when it starts influencing our entire nation to try to convince everybody that we need to normalize this, then we have a problem. And people would say, oh, well, hopefully they would at least admit that, yes, that is what we're trying to do, so we can continue on the conversation. But if not, I mean, I know it's being normalized, because I've seen it. Before it was like, oh, not that it was the right thing to do, but when I was in high school, if you were gay, and I'm sure it still happens now, but I mean, you got made fun of and stuff, and that's not how we should have dealt with that, But then when you normalize it, not only are the ones who were really struggling with homosexuality or any of these other issues, I mean, not only were they struggling, and then finally we're free to do that. Then you had other people who I don't think were actually struggling, that are saying, "Hey, I want to be in this lifestyle," And I still have yet to find anybody in my personal life that I've met that is that I that has that is part of that community that has not had some kind of sexual attack against them, some kind of like a messed up home. So there's like a in their brains there's some kind of cloud that kind of judges, messes up their judgment of what a man looks like because they don't have a father, or what a woman looks like because they don't have a mother. And so I think it is starting to be normalized. And so one of the things we don't want to happen is we don't want a school trying to normalize that to our kids, because we don't think it's normal. We think it's a choice. It is an abnormal choice that people make when they join any of these various things. And I do think there are certain cases where people probably are going to struggle with it more than other people. But I know a lot of people, and a lot of people just are doing it for attention, or they're doing it to rebel or whatever. And so I think DeSantis, that's what he's trying to fight against. He's trying to fight against this attempt to normalize it by teaching it in school, because that's the best place to normalize it, is in school, right? And so we need to separate. I think we need to separate that conversation, especially from young kids, but I think all throughout public school, I think we need to separate that. And I think that's what DeSantis's attempt is to separate that.
Yeah, and we see this. I think it goes back to the sex culture that we're living in. They try to normalize it. They try to push it to younger and younger. And if this bill were to fall through and they were able to teach it, it would force us as parents to have to introduce these type of subjects to our children, which most parents would say that is too young to have them introduced to anything like that. And so it would force parents to introduce it earlier than they would want to. And
Yeah,
I mean,
and so the transgender or the LGBT person would respond, and they would say, well, what about that child out there that's struggling? The child that feels like that child doesn't know anything. The child's young.
Yeah.
It's not. And plus it's not. It's not the school's job to teach about sexuality.
Yeah.
I don't think. I think it's on the parents. But then again, when we have so many crumbling homes out there,
Yeah.
then we've got, now we've got a bigger problem, because if somebody else doesn't teach them, they're not getting taught anything at their homes in how to deal with this or anything. That's even in Christian homes as well.
Yeah. I think that's where DeSantis is coming from. Like, it's the parents' job to teach this type of thing and to teach morals. The schools are, I think he even said that in one of his quotes, that it's the school's job to teach math, science, your different subjects.
Yeah.
You don't go forward to teach them these type of things.
And so, and even like Bible, like I'm okay. Cause that's how people turn this on us, because they might say something like, oh, well, you Christians, you say you want God in school. You said you want this in school or whatever. Listen, I'm okay if that's not taught in the classroom, right? Science classroom's a little different, because even history classrooms are a little different, because Christianity played a huge part in history. But I mean, it's not like they don't mention the Christian guys in history class. That's not happening.
Yeah.
But skipping over that dramatic, the event and the person that changed the entire way we take time.
Yeah.
That's how we track years and stuff. I mean, that's pretty important. But so like I would be okay saying, hey, if you wanted to have a LGBTQIA plus meeting after school, where kids had the option, parents had the options to allow their kids to go, that'd be a whole different conversation, because then you're actually working with the parents. You're not trying to do this under the parents, and I think that's what they're thinking is, we've got parents, like terrible people like me, who are going to tell their kids that, hey, this is not a natural way of life. And it's not even that, it's a sinful way of life. And so they're thinking, well, instead of trying to convince that parent that he's wrong, I'm going to convince that child that it's okay. And DeSantis says, no, that's not your job.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where he's drawing the line. That's where we draw the line. I looked at the Florida sexuality education law just to go back because I wanted to see how it was today, whereas opposed it might have been different when we were there. But it says that law says that in order for a high school student to graduate, they must receive 1/2 credit in life experience skills in either the 9th or the 10th grade. This is when the HIV, the AIDS, sexual abstinence, and teen pregnancy is all talked about. And so this is all the way pushed back to 9th or 10th grade, and he's just pushing the law to the 3rd grade. So he's not even pushing it. I feel like how far he could, he's slowly progressing it. And even within this education law, it says parents may remove any children from sex education with an opt-out policy. And even the liberals who may not want this thing to pass, they probably wouldn't even offer that option to opt out of whatever education that they were wanting to push.
Yeah. And I think we also got to think about it in terms of what about the LGBTQ teacher, Like I saw a post, and because I follow a lot of LGBTQ pages because I want to know what they're saying too. And I saw something like, oh yeah, when DeSantis passes a bill that says don't say gay, then it shows the teacher just covering their classrooms and dressing dramatically so that the kids basically have to know that there is something different about this person,
Yeah.
And so that gets a little more tricky because what do we tell a teacher if a kid walks up to you and says, hey, who's this other guy, Mr. Jenkins, who's this other guy that's in this picture with you, and then what's the teacher supposed to say, oh, well, don't worry about that, it's my brother, are they supposed to lie, or are they allowed to tell the truth? It gets a little more tricky there. But even then, it's not that, and I think the bill probably would address that because I think it would open them up for a lawsuit if they talked about it in any way. But I think a lot of those lawsuits probably would never make it anyways. But it does get a little more difficult. But I think it's completely different because they're not teaching it. They're just saying this is a choice that I've made. They're not going to spend a whole class period talking about it or whatever. So it's a little different, but I don't know how you would make a bill that would protect against that, but then allow teaching, because the bill would be so hard to create because it would just make so many loopholes, that if you could say, well, if a child asked you about it, then you'd be okay, so then it gives them all these loopholes, and so it just makes it more difficult. So I think the tougher route, more like what DeSantis decided to do, I think is the better route, because for one, there should be a sense of fear when you try to indoctrinate children into this belief, and God forbid Christians use the word indoctrinate, but I've been accused. I've been had some exchanging of words over that too, but but I think this is a huge step in the right direction, though. Listen, parents, like, especially if you're a Christian parent, don't wait until your kid, if they graduate high school to say, hey, listen, there's also gay people out there. Don't wait that long. Listen, the Bible talks about the fallen world. If you're teaching your kids the Bible, they're going to know about that. I talk about it in True Love Waits. The Bible is very clear on homosexuality and a lot of other sexual sins, some of which the parents are committing at the moment. But that's a different conversation for a different day. But so it's not like, I don't think all the responsibility needs to be on us youth pastors either. Like, you guys need to work with us. You need to work with your kids, teach them the ways of the world, because they need to know it. And that's one of the things I'm very thankful for my father, because he taught me. He was like, listen, Johnny, that's what he called me. He says, listen, this is how the world is, and this is how Christ says to live. This is how the world is. So over and over and over again, that's how he portrayed life to me. And he said, listen, people do this. People become drug addicts, because of these choices. That's how this fallen world is. I think parents need to step up and do that too.
Yeah. There's going to be kids that are much more mature, can learn it earlier than the others, and should be up to the parents. And so as a result of all this bill, when Disney came out, DeSantis had to respond. And his response and his plan, and it seems to actually be going through, is to strip Disney of their individual government and to take away their special tax status for the properties. And so up to this point, Disney had their own little government system that helped run it. They had their own special tax as a part of their properties. And now it's looking to be stripped away, but it's not looking to happen even if it passes until at least 2023. And so most of us look at it and it's going into effect immediately if it passes, but there's a lot of time that has to pass.
Yeah. And just because you're the biggest company in Florida or maybe even in the United States, I don't know, but that doesn't mean you get to disobey the law.
Yeah.
That's not what that means. And that's basically what DeSantis is telling them, okay, you want to play these games, let's play these games, and truth be told, there's a high chance DeSantis could be our next president too. So
yeah,
that'd make for an interesting 4 years.
Amen to that. But we saw that in history. Like, we've always stopped companies from becoming monopolies. And I think with their own government status and trying to disobey things like this, they're trying to become their own monopoly. Yeah. And so we're going back in history and trying to stop them. Now, different companies now, we probably swear are monopolies, but we can't get into that right at this podcast.
Yeah, it's crazy. And one of the things I'm most excited about, because it's always felt like conservatives just had a weak voice, because we're going to get to here in just a second. I don't think we should boycott Disney or nothing, but people have always thought that conservatives have a weak voice. They'll probably think I have a weak voice, for doing that. But one of the coolest things I've seen recently is the Daily Wire has stepped up and they said, hey, we're going to start producing content, or Christians has said, hey, we're going to start producing content. Like The Chosen is a massive, well created series. But Daily Wire is creating even secular content, secular, animation movies and stuff, and they're a strong conservative group, and that kind of thing is not going to be in those movies. You're not going to try to teach kids through some movie what's going on. So that's another way Disney has responded. And that was the biggest response that most people are hearing, is that now they want to say, hey, listen, we need to have better representation of this group in our movies, in our kids' movies. And so what they're saying is now we need to add LGBTQIA plus characters, Yeah, that's what they're trying to do now. And so I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking, man, when my kids watching this movie, and they see this character or this girl kiss another, Emerald sees this girl kiss another girl, and she's gonna be like, well, that's weird. I thought only boys and girls kissed or something, And then I have to deal with that because my child watched a kid's movie. That's gonna make me furious. And so that's what they're doing. We'll get to that here in just a second, how we should actually respond. But that's what they're doing. They want to add those characters in there because, like I said, if you're going to normalize it, you got to start with the kids. You can still change their minds, not with these hard-headed, stubborn adults like me who aren't going to change their minds, apparently. And Christian can attest to this. I'm okay changing my mind. I went to college with the belief that if I found Christianity to not be true, I would give up my own faith, my entire way of living, but that didn't happen. And I stayed open-minded and I sought after the truth, and I'll do the same thing with this. If somebody can explain to me and prove to me that people are actually born this way, it would change my viewpoint. Not as dramatically, I'm sure, as they would hope, but it would definitely change my viewpoint because it changes my whole argument. But are you ready to move in how to respond?
Yeah. So I think now we've got to see how the church should respond. So I think should we support the bill? Should we support them banning the instruction of this for the kindergarten through the third grade? And I think I've already kind of hit my view on this point, where it's something that should be part of sex education, something that the parents should decide. And so boycotting it at least till the third grade would definitely be part of it. Because as we saw, even in their sex education, it's not taught until the 9th or the 10th grade. And kids at this age would not be able to fully grasp, fully understand what they're talking about looking at this. They wouldn't be able to fully make a rational decision upon this point.
Yeah, and I even take a step forward further. I don't think this should be taught even in sexuality classes. In sex education classes, because it's not. It's not sex.
Yeah, that's true too.
And so that's another thing is, I'm not playing into the narrative that that this is a normal thing. This is just another way to have sex. This is just another way to express yourself or whatever. I'm not playing those games, and if my daughter was in public school and they did decide, I would respect the school's decision to decide to do that. There's no way I would let my daughter do that. She would probably hate it that I would be the one teaching her sex education, but that'd be better than this, because and even sex education itself has changed over the years. Before they really were pushing abstinence, and now it's more like safe sex, instead. They're kind of leaning, they're trying to, kind of feeling that pressure and the statistics and stuff of how many kids, have premarital sex and have sex when they're in school and all that stuff. So they're pushing more like safe sex more, but that's the same kind of thing too. So, but then again, even if your kid does go through this, it's not just the schools. It's not the school's job at all, really. But it's not just the school's job to teach your kids sex education. It is your job as a parent. I highly suggest the Intimate Covenant podcast, but do not suggest it unless you're married. There's a reason it's called Intimate Covenant. Okay. And it talks about, I found this podcast because I was trying to find a solid definition for what sex is. And I found this podcast, and what they do is, the two people that run it, a husband and wife, they explain how to have more like holistic sex between a married couple. And then they also talk about things, though, how to talk about this with your kids. So if you're married, you have kids, you want to know more about that, check it out. It's Intimate Covenant podcast. They did not tell me to do that. They don't even know who I am. So, but it's a great podcast. So I highly suggest listening to that. But they suggest that you tell your kids about this kind of thing early on. And they also say, make sure you tell your kids, hey, don't go into our bedroom, don't even knock. Just if it's doors closed and we're in there, it's not for you to go in. But she was like, even our kids, they knew about that stuff, young. And I think that's okay. But I think they're a lot better to talk about that, how to explain it to your kids better than I am. But it's a very good podcast. Just check it out.
Yeah. That's a good point. And I think even if they ended up teaching anything like this or sex education period, it's not going to be, their opinions are not going to be formed by a 1 hour class during the week. There's going to be something else infiltrating. And unless we do it at home, they're going to find another source too. And it's all over social media. And so in order for us to combat that,
and we face this being pastors, especially youth pastors. Pastors talking to adults. If you're an adult, you can't blame yourself on your parents anymore. Okay. But for youth, I teach them something, but it's like, well, what's the point? Because they're going to go home and they're going to hear and they're going to see something completely different than what I'm teaching. And it's like tonight I'm teaching. We're recording this on a Wednesday, but tonight I'm teaching on when Jesus says, you must hate your father and your mother. If you want to be my disciple, you must hate your father and your mother, and I do a little bit of exegesis for you, but he doesn't mean that if anybody who's going to be a Christian must hate their parents, that's not what he means. Yeah. What he was responding to is, back then, if you became a Christian, you became a follower of Christ, and your parents didn't approve of that, if your parents didn't approve of that, then they would kind of exclude you from everything that they do, every family gathering, every religious ritual. You would be excluded from that because you decided to follow Christ. And so he's saying you have to prioritize me even over your family if you want to be my disciple. So listen for that on the podcast. Actually, that'll release before this one. So if you're listening to this, listen to that podcast and you can hear that teaching on that passage in Matthew chapter 10. But all right, so let's go ahead and move on here. I want to try to finish in about 10 minutes maybe. Canceling our Disney accounts. What you think about that, Christian?
Ooh, what do I think? That's a loaded question. If anybody knows me, if you've seen me growing up, we went to Disney a decent amount, and we've watched Disney shows pretty much all of our lives. And so I guess maybe it's coming from a little bias, but I personally would not cancel Disney accounts. If you're looking at it and you look at Disney, Jonathan brought it up earlier, they used to give to both parties. And I was listening to a podcast this morning, like Disney is a business. They're going to make money. They're going to try to make money wherever they can. And they're a non-Christian organization, as many people want to say, yeah, they started off with good morals. They weren't a Christian organization. So they're not going to act like Christians. We can't expect them to act like Christians. They don't have the Holy Spirit that we have. And so they're going to go and they're going to make money. And in the podcast I was listening to, he's like, all this LGBTQ, I'm sure is bringing in bank. Like they're getting a lot from this community, a lot of money. And yet the Christians are like, we're going to boycott them, which they're not bringing in that much money comparatively to the LGBTQ community. And that's why he brought up how there's no more Night of Joy usually, but there is a Gay Pride month. There is Gay Pride celebrations because those are bringing in more money than that Night of Joy was bringing in, even before all of this happened, because some people were boycotting Disney at that point too.
Yeah.
And so we see this homeschool families. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if I was a business owner and I was trying to make money, even as a Christian, and that's why as a Christian, you have a hard time if you're going to be a business owner. Yeah. Because and honestly, it's really just not your place to say. If I owned a little coffee shop, I don't think it's my place to say anything about it. But granted, because I have a presence on the internet. If I open up a coffee shop right now with my podcast and people are able to find me on the podcast and stuff and hear this podcast, it'd be a little more difficult. But it's just not your place as a business. And here's the thing, and I would have a hard time. And honestly, I'm one of those people who doesn't actually have an account. I just steal accounts from other people. Yeah, Disney's gonna hunt me down. So even if I wanted to cancel it, literally all I would do is just not sign in because I don't pay for it anyways. But like there are some good, like the Encanto movie. Like my daughter absolutely loves that movie, and if I stopped playing that movie for her, I would go crazy. I would lose my mind because she literally will cry and fuss and everything. But you turn on Encanto, unless she's hungry or actually has a problem, she's going to be calm. It is miraculous.
We don't talk about Bruno, man.
Yeah, well, we do now. If you've seen the movie.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting a text from my boss. But yeah. So so the way I deal with Disney is like, this is how I plan to deal with it in the future. And I think this is good for all movies, is I think not necessarily that I need to cancel my account or not go to Disney or whatever, because unless it just gets, I don't know. I can't even think of a scenario where it would be so bad where I'm like, I need to cancel this. But I do wish that Disney would feel the repercussions of what they decided to do here. And I respect Christians who decide, hey, I want to boycott Disney. I respect that. I just ask that you do the same for me. But like I said, I don't want to shelter my kids or my daughter her entire life. I don't want her to shelter from any of that stuff. And I also don't want her to miss out on some of the wonders of life, just because of some side issue, so I'm not going to have a problem taking my daughter to Disney, And granted, if we're walking around Disney and we see, a gay person, and she's like, what's that person's deal, and she's 9 years old, maybe we'll talk about it on the car ride home or something, And then as far as like movies and TV shows and stuff go, I'll just watch it first. I'll watch it and then I'll say, okay, there is a character in this. She's not ready to deal with this kind of thing yet. So I won't be watching this. Now, if it gets to the point where it's like every single movie and they're just pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing to where you can't hardly watch anything, then I might consider giving it up then, or just buying it, individual movies or something, definitely have to have Encanto, but yeah, so yeah, and that's kind of where I come down on it. And the whole I'll give my final thoughts, you give your final thoughts, and I'll close this out. But the whole issue, it comes down to, are they born this way or not? We're starting with because we're not defending this view in this podcast. We're starting in this podcast with the presupposition that people are not born this way, that they make these choices. At least that's my presupposition. I think Christian agrees, but so if we start there, if we start by saying it's a choice, and then we could turn to the Bible as Christians and we say it's a sinful choice, then we that's why we're dealing with it like this. That's why this is such a big deal, because it's like what we're looking at is we're seeing Satan behind the scenes is convincing people through the acts of Disney even that this stuff is okay. So I would highly suggest to parents, watch the shows first. Listen, I know Disney had some great movies, and I know some movies you got to be careful with, and even not just the LGBTQ stuff, but also like sex scenes and the way some of the characters are dressed. I mean, there's a lot of things you got to watch out for, especially teenage years. So watch the movies first, proof them yourself, and just try your best to honor God. And if you think the best way to honor God in this situation is to boycott Disney, I fully support you. I fully support your decision to do that. I just don't think it's absolutely necessary, at least not at this point, because it's not like they're doing it for everything. But listen, we also love God. We love people, and I've talked with many people. I've hung out with people, and I have the personality where if you're around me, you pretty much are always going to feel comfortable. I just have that personality. It's really just this love that Christ has given me. I love because he first loved me. So I love people. I love sinners. I love sinners. I love people who sin, because I know I'm also a sinner too. But if we're going to start talking about this in a way where it's not sin, then we've got a problem. And that's when we're going to butt heads. But we do love people. We do love people who struggle with LGBTQ lifestyles. But we will not. I will not support this lifestyle, and I will not support normalizing this lifestyle.
Yeah, full agreement on that. And I think looking at passages like Romans 12, where it talks about not being conformed to the world, we want to take that passage, and the Christians, a lot of times who may want to boycott, are saying we just need to do away with it, kind of shelter and be to ourselves, that cancel culture. Because a lot of people now want to go and don't say cancel culture, but they want to boycott. And if you look at it, it pretty much boils down to the same thing. And so, but in order to reach the people, we see it in Christ's ministry. He's in the trenches with those who are in sin. He's talking to them. He's building relationships. He's saving them. And so we can't just fully take ourselves away, because if you take light out of the darkness, there's only darkness. And so in order to help even with this issue, we have to be in the trenches. And if we boycott, it's hard not to boycott other things too, because all these other companies that we buy stuff from, I guarantee you they're supporting it in some sort of way or fashion. If they're a non-Christian company, they're going to be supporting it. And so it's almost hard not to at that point. But I think just like Jonathan said, we need to view it before our children do. Growing up, I wasn't allowed to watch Harry Potter because my parents didn't really have much time to sit there and to watch all those Harry Potter movies. There's like 8 of them. they didn't have time to sit there to go through that movie to see if it was okay. Because that was one of those controversial movies growing up, to where there was different opinions. And so, yeah, I wanted to watch it, but I definitely respect my parents for not wanting me to view it without them viewing it first, not wanting it to indoctrinate me. And so I know we didn't really get to the homeschool question, but I'm kind of in the same belief that we shouldn't just not desegregate, but shouldn't just separate ourselves from that culture, that we should be in the trenches, because in order to be an influence, we have to be out there with them. Now, we aren't to conform to them. We aren't to conform to this way of life, but we also are to be a representative. And 1 Corinthians talks about this Christian liberty, and I think it boils down to that, where your convictions are your convictions. This is one of those almost gray areas. There's no black and white answer, I don't think. And so we are to respect each other no matter what decisions we make. We are to pray about it. We are to seek the Lord about it. And so I think we just need to respect each other's opinions, whether you are that person that says boycott, I have nothing to do with Disney, or whether you say I don't support it, but I will still go to Disney at this point. That's all I got.
All right. Well, listen, if you've got something you want to say or yell or whatever, email us, graceballministries@gmail.com. And if there's a worthwhile consideration, we'll address it. Or at least one of us. So, I've already given my final thoughts, so we'll just go ahead and close it out. And there's so many more things I wish we could talk about, and so many things that, just given our status in life, that we're not really prepared enough to talk about. Neither one of us had to make the decision of whether to homeschool or not. So, like stuff like that, there's not a whole lot we can say about that. We can say our thoughts, but we're not in that pressure right now. So
it might change.
Yeah, right. Listen, we hope that this was an eye opener. We hope that you learned something from this, and if nothing else, you at least know a conservative's perspective and where we stand on the issue. And and we hope that this helps you kind of understand a little more what's going on too. Maybe you just listened to the beginning, and then when we started sharing our opinions, you shut it off or something. But listen, we're going to keep rolling. We're not going to sit and just dwell on this one topic. We've got a bunch of other topics we want to talk about. We're just trying to figure out when to do it. So super excited to say I talked to Austin Pounds, and he is going to record with me this summer. And we're going to finish up our inerrancy debate, I hope. Our plan was to do at least 3 parts, so hopefully we can do all 3 parts, the other 2 parts this summer. So go check that out, and hopefully we can get into some more theology and just whatever. I mean, that's the whole point. That's the cool thing about Grace Ball Ministries, is we've opened up ourselves to talk about any topic, whether that be Disney or the creation account in Genesis. So we could talk about pretty much anything. So if you have any suggestions or anything you want to hear our thoughts on, just email us graceballministries@gmail.com, and we'll handle those as quick as we can, and we'll respond to you in a timely fashion. So, all right, well, we'll see you on the next podcast. Not sure exactly what the next one's going to be about just yet, but I'm sure it'll be something good. So make sure you stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the Facebook page. That's the best place to follow us on, is Facebook. And then follow the podcast. And it's easy to listen to podcasts and stuff, while you're driving. So make sure you do that too. That'd be the easiest place to listen, because I know they're long, but we want to make sure we cover good solid ground. So, all right, Christian. Well, thank you very much, Christian, and we will see you all in the next podcast.
All right. See y'all later.
Thank you so much for watching the Grace Bond Ministries podcast or listening to the podcast. I know there's various ways that you could be listening to this right now or watching this right now, but I just want to say thank you so much. And if you would, wherever you're listening, if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Podcast, please leave a 5-star review and write a little thing in there. If you're on Facebook, leave a comment. Let me know how this impacted you, or even any other questions or comments or concerns you may have. And also, if you have an idea or you have something you'd really want to talk more deeply about, you can always email me at gracebondministries@gmail.com. But thank you so much. Remember, for it is by grace you are saved through faith, and not of yourselves, for it is the gift of God. Thank you for listening to Grace Bond Ministries.